hopefully an extended network. Each event is focused either on people or a process. In the process sessions, we talk about how we deliver value in our business. Topics here include lean tools and thinking, operational excellence, sustainability, and digital transformation. In the people sessions, we look beyond the process to the who, discussing topics like leadership, teams, culture, and professional development. Never Mind the Buzzwords isn't just an event that you attend, it's an event to participate in. So get involved in the conversation, put your camera on if you can, share your thoughts, ideas, or questions in the chat, or feel free to unmute yourself. And don't forget to stay in touch. We have a LinkedIn group where we upload resources and recordings from this community. And if you follow Never Mind the Buzzwords on Eventbrite, you'll be notified whenever we post a new event. Good morning, everyone. You are all very welcome to our Never Mind the Buzzwords session for October. I'm kind of losing track of dates, so I had to just check there. We are back today discussing a very interesting topic, in my opinion, and we're joined by a guest who I will introduce now shortly. But I'll just pop this slide up. So we are discussing performance management, and specifically a little bit more in the lens of remote performance management, how we can navigate the hybrid work model, which is quite popular amongst various workplaces at the moment. So hopefully you'll come away from this session with some kind of tips and tools for taking what kind of the researchers suggest, best practice out there, and then how do you actually kind of put that into your own practice. So as I said, it is more so tailored slightly to just navigating the remote side of things, but it is definitely going to be applicable to everyone regardless of your working situation. So hopefully you will take something from today. We are going to be, that's just a quick kind of overview of what we are doing, just talking about what is performance management, one of the theories or the lenses that we can view it through, which is the conservation of resource theory. Talking a bit about, the kind of employee experience, their well-being, the challenges, the benefits of remote performance management, and then moving into, okay, how do we actually take these theories and put it into practice. So hopefully coming away with a few takeaway points. But I would like to just introduce my guest. You'll see that I'm joined by Pádraig or Podge O'Connor. Do you want to give a brief introduction to yourself?
Of course. Thank you, Julie. And hello, everyone. It's good to meet you and good to be here. As Julie mentioned, so my name's Pádraig, and most people know me as Podge, and I'm currently an operations manager at a company called Noom for our coaching and customer service team. So I work closely with external partners and essentially help manage their performance and the performance of those partners. If you're unaware, so Noom is essentially a health wellness app. So it's designed to help users achieve weight loss, achieve their fitness goals. And they do that mostly through coaching, meal planning, and especially behavioral psychology techniques. So previously at Noom, I was a senior coach program manager, and that's where I supported the development of our coaching product. And it was in that position I got to help a lot of leaders develop and help a lot of coaches to develop as well. So it's that position really where I developed my passion for building communities through coaching, through development, and I really like to design kind of ecosystems and help people try and make an impact in the roles that they do. I guess I'll just continue on with my background for now, Julie, and then we can segue into today's discussion. I truly am a lifelong learner, and that's reflected with the fact that I have 3 degrees. So I'm originally a biology secondary school teacher, and then I also have a master's in nutritional science, and then I'm just finished up a master's in psychology as well, which in my thesis I talked about remote performance management.
Amazing.
Other interests I have outside of work is as a typical Kerry man. Of course, I play GAA or Gaelic football. And I'm definitely aware that there might be people viewing this who aren't actually in Ireland. So I would strongly encourage you to YouTube or check out that sport. It's very interesting. Will I just segue into the agenda if that's okay?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
All
Thank
right.
you so much for that bit of background to yourself. I also just want to highlight the commitment levels that you're actually not in Ireland yourself either. You are over in the States where it is currently, what, 5 in the morning, just after.
Just
So
turned. That's how passionate I am
that
about performance
exactly. When you were saying passion, dedication, I was like, yes, exactly. So
management.
thank you so much for the very early start that you're giving us today. So yeah, thank you.
Course. No, you're more than welcome, and it's great to be here. Awesome. Just so if we are looking at our agenda, and before we do begin, I do have a second monitor to my right, which I have our PowerPoint, and then in the center is going to be all of you. So if possible, it's just not a nice small intimate group. We could get a lot of discussion going during today's session as well. So we will look at performance management. Now, performance management is like, oof, that's a pretty big topic. So we're just going to look specifically to if you're a line manager, perhaps a small organization, or even an employee, to provide some kind of tips on how to have management conversations and to understand the impact that a good performance management system can have on our well-being, as well as some best practices and take-home points too. Since performance management is so vast, we're not really going to focus on OKRs or KPIs or how to come up with strategic goals. And we won't really focus on like performance management, the systems themselves, and actually setting it up. So we're more focused on the coaching aspect on executing performance management. All right, I think we can move on, Julie. I think you've
Yeah.
mentioned the question next.
Yeah, exactly. So I was curious just to see who is in the room and what we can do just to get a sense of that. If you either get your phone, scan that QR code that's down at the bottom there, or alternatively, say if you're maybe using a laptop, you can open a browser in your phone or in your on your browser on your laptop, and you can just go to menti.com and enter that code 1676773, and it will just allow you to vote there on how do you currently work. So are you currently fully in person? Are you some sort of hybrid? Maybe it's 1 to 2 days in the office, maybe it's 3 to 4 days in the office, maybe you're fully remote. Um, so I'll just give you a few minutes just to access that. I just have this question and then another question in a moment, which so keep the Menti open if you've already voted. But we can see those kind of results coming in where no one actually on this call is fully in person at the moment. So yeah, it's I suppose makes sense why you're on this call when we're talking about more so hybrid and remote. So majority going in quite a kind of a minority of days into an office, right? 1 or 2 days. A few people maybe more the 3 to 4 days they're going into an office, and just one person so far is fully remote. Um, so yeah, I suppose it is definitely a way of working that definitely has a lot of benefits. It seems to be quite popular with a lot of people. I might just go on to the next question, which is asking about your own preferences. How do you prefer to work? Right. So we know how you currently work, with a majority coming in as 1 to 2 days in an office. But what would be your preference then if you could have full control over this? Let's see what people are voting. So um, again, we can see that 1 to 2 days in the office seems to be quite popular for people. Um, Another person then thinking they'd prefer maybe a little bit more time at the office. Um, Okay, but definitely the preference here coming out more so for the hybrid, more so able to work maybe from home. another person coming in fully remote as well. Um, any thoughts on that, Podge? Any kind of surprises
I,
there or?
I do. I'm trying to think of my thoughts without calling people out specifically. I was very interested by the hybrid 3 to 4 days at the office group from the first question.
Mm,
If someone does feel comfortable, tell me, please do. If not, or type in the chat. If not, I am just curious to know, was that a progression? I wonder, has the company always been, we're going 3 to 4 days in the office, or was it we're going 1 to 2 days? Okay, let's try to come back in a little bit more, because I am seeing that in some organizations.
yeah, yeah, that kind of encouragement. So yeah, does anyone want to come off mute? As we say, it's a, small enough group that you might feel comfortable, or else you can pop in an answer into the chat.
And that's okay. We might get into it as we go through the presentation. But yeah, I do think that's interesting that most people want a hybrid model, and I think that fits with what the statistics say as well. So it kind of leads me, it's going to be really good webinar for that sense, because we're going to equip with tools like how to deal in a hybrid situation, so in person or even remotely too.
Yeah,
Awesome. So with that, let's dive into what is performance management. And when you do look for definitions of performance management, you will find a lot. There's a lot of different types of definitions. As I said, it's quite a vast area of study, even currently. But I took two definitions of performance management. First, I took a more traditional model, which involves continuously assessing, monitoring, and the progression of employees and of the organizational output. So when I did do my thesis, I found a more modern definition that I used of performance management, which is a process of setting performance expectations, providing feedback, supporting employee development and motivation. So in order to achieve the organizational goals. So if we look at it from a historical context, organizations tended to operate in a more hierarchical manner. So like top-down directives, strong emphasis on achieving targets. And I think the traditional definition reflects this. So the primary concern was the end result. And sometimes, unfortunately, like that was at the expense of the employee. But the more modern twist, I think, as we transitioned into like the information age and the knowledge economy, there's just growing recognition of the value of human capital. So organizations now understand that their success was not just about hitting numbers, but was deeply intertwined in the well-being, motivation, and development of their employees. So the modern definition is a lot more people-centric to an extent.
mm, brilliant. Yeah, which I suppose kind of aligns with a lot of the, newer ways of working. It's putting people kind of at the heart of what you're doing. Um,
Correct.
but
That's a very good thing, Julie.
absolutely, yeah, sure. I wouldn't be in a
Yeah.
job if it wasn't. um, well, I keep going along to the theory then.
Yeah, let's pop on to the conservation of resource theory. Okay, so there's quite a bit here. I'll definitely break it down, but essentially the conservation of resources, or COR theory, is a psychological model. It just provides an insight into how the individuals manage stress and manage resources. So at its core, it suggests that we all have set valued resources. So these can be tangible, right? You can things like money, tools you use, but we also have the intangible resources like self-esteem, or social support. So what we try to do naturally is we try to obtain, retain, and protect these resources. So when there's a loss or even a perceived threat of a loss to these resources, it can lead to stress. So you can think about a time where it could be your skills weren't being utilized at work, or when there were rumors of budget cuts. So like these type of situations create a sense of resource threat. I think given the year we're in, I mean, COVID and the pandemic was an absolute a huge example of that, where people's resources felt like they were losing resources. So you lost the social connection with your team, perhaps if you were in office, but you also lost that kind of job security, you lost just security, like security of just what was the environment around you was pretty unknown at the very beginning. So all those would lead to a loss of resources. So to combat this stress or potential loss, individuals sometimes might invest more of their resources. So if you think in a work setting, this might be working longer hours to take on additional tasks to prove your work to the organization. However, obviously, we have to be careful here, and it can be a dangerous cycle where you end up depleting your resources, and then this leads to burnout, and this is what leads to disengagement at your work. So, yeah, from an organizational perspective, it is kind of important to understand this theory, and I think as we go through these slides, we can kind of look at it through the lens of acquiring, retaining, or even losing resources.
Yeah, and I think what you mentioned there about like the perceived loss, I think is probably an important point as well, because a manager might be thinking, oh no, they haven't had any loss of resources, but even just that fear or that worry or that like belief or rumors or anything like that could, like you say, impact their experience, I suppose, and their well-being.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I suppose when organizations are kind of thinking through their performance management systems, like even having them in their mind or thinking through those things that could really help create a better employee experience too.
Yeah, and help
Awesome.
help them, I presume, just like help managers just kind of understand people as well and kind of expect like this might be how they'll respond, rather than just going in with, okay, I have my agenda or I have my interests, but actually, considering this lens as well. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's good. We will touch on some of those aspects later, but I really like you made like a co-collaborative that's to like the employee and the leader both working together.
Yeah. I'll keep going along to performance and well-being then.
Yeah. Next, we're just going to link like how does the performance link to the employee well-being? And if you actually go on to the next slide, Julie, we can talk through that. So it's important. Like we want to cultivate a culture of engagement and belonging and purpose. So really is an important aspect for performance management strategies to make them effective. One and to provide buy-in for the organization, right? Because I do think, and please feel free again to type in the chat or on mute. Like I do think there's a stigma sometimes around performance management that it can be employees might be like, oh, I have to get reviewed every so often, and leaders could even be saying, oh, I have to do a tick the box exercise with my employees, and it's really not meant to be that way. I would hope it's a bit more inspiring and can lead to an increased engagement. So it's not just about setting goals and measuring outcomes. The heart of performance management lies in creating an environment just where employees feel engaged, they feel valued, and driven by a sense of purpose. So connecting the company mission with the employee's individual purpose. So every employee has their own personal why. There's a reason for doing what they do. So aligning this purpose with the company's mission, that really is the sweet spot. So that you'll have a motivated employee and you're striving towards your organizational goals. Do employees feel they belong or fit with the company? So belonging is a fundamental human need. When employees feel they fit in, and are a valued part of the company, they're committed, they're motivated, and they're productive. When employees see a clear connection between their role and the bigger picture, they're driven. They're more driven from within. So this intrinsic motivation often leads to higher creativity, in innovation, and dedication too. So engagement isn't just about job satisfaction. Engaged employees are actually emotionally invested in their work and the success of the company. This emotional connection often translates to higher performance. I I do think that's an important point. Like from my point of view, you want people to be invested in the company, but is there such a thing as maybe an overinvestment? Like possibly, I think there has to be a healthy boundary and healthy balance as well there too. You don't want them to be so invested that they like sacrifice their family to work an extra few hours for a project that if you're the organizational owner, like that they do for you. I think that would be kind of stepping over. So being really careful of boundaries in that instance is important too. Uh, Disengagement leads to quiet quitting. That's a popular phrase of the last year or so, but it actually is. It could be a loss of talent as well. So when you are a disengaged employee, you might be physically present, but you could be mentally checked out. So this is the phenomenon that people refer to as quiet quitting. And over time, this really can escalate to higher turnover, and companies losing valuable talent. So it is really important. And as a leader, I do like to kind of follow these kind of tips to be able to keep and retain, because you want to retain talent. It's good just from a business standpoint in terms of like being creative and achieving goals, but it is also good from a bottom line standpoint too. It's expensive to acquire new talent and to hire. The last point I just want to mention is the VOI, and I'd be curious to know if anyone's heard that term before. I've been recently introduced to it, but just a value on investment. So traditionally, you might have heard of ROI, which is a return on investment, and that focuses on financial metrics. But VOI emphasizes like the intangible product that your employees bring, like the employee success, well-being, and development. So when companies actually prioritize VOI, they often see a ripple effect of performance standards and overall success in their company too. So in essence, the foundation of effective performance management is not just metrics and evaluation. It's about creating a culture where an employee feels engaged, valued, and driven by a deeper sense of purpose. I'm going to pause. Is there any questions at this point? Julie, might you have any questions?
I'm just was having a quick look in the chat, and I can just see Aisling has given a comment there, just that she does believe that regular feedback really helps. Everyone's on the same page and understands what's working well, and what could be better. Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. I think that it's easier to kind of change course and to notice, oh, we're not on the right track, rather than, oh, we've gone too far down in a particular direction and now it's can't find our way back, or it takes a lot of effort to get back. So yeah, I think the regular feedback
Absolutely.
is great. Yeah.
Aisling is peeking at the future slides, I think, but obviously feedback is incredibly important. But I love that the word regular is before feedback as well, because yeah, feedback in real time is incredibly valuable.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. So I don't think anyone has any questions at this stage, but again, if anybody wants to just pop their hand up or just unmute or pop anything into the chat, we'll come to that as we go along. So yeah, don't worry about interrupting us. We don't mind.
Awesome. Shall we move on? I think next is we're going to speak to the challenges and benefits.
Yeah.
Excellent. So you can continue on to the next slide. Thank you.
Mm.
All right. So when we look at challenges, I think is my question up there. Okay, so I'll definitely go through a few. I would love to hear from the group as well, because this isn't an exhaustive list. There's probably one or two that are missing that might register with you, or something you might have experienced in your work as well. So the few that I put up, first I went for communication challenges. So when you are working remote, like effective communication becomes even more critical in a remote setting. So face-to-face interactions are limited. Managers really need to be like adept and in tune to using digital communication tools, and must be proactive in reaching out to ensure clarity and understanding. I do think this is a pretty big one for organizations. So when you disseminate information, particularly via formats like Slack or text-based or even virtual such as Zoom, there's so much stuff going on, and each individual has something else going on. You really want to ensure that the information that you are putting out is being received by your employees, and that can be quite a challenge. And the second thing I went for is building trust and autonomy. So managers need to trust their employees more in a remote setting because you're not physically working with them. So this really requires a shift from monitoring hours to focusing on outcomes and deliverables. And again, I'd love to hear people's experience. I think there might be a push-pull here at the moment between the kind of like the trust aspect kind of bleeds in a bit to monitoring, a little bit into the use of technology and how technology is being used to measure performance as well. Next, I went for just team engagement or team cohesion and engagement. So building team cohesion remotely, it requires intentional effort. So you don't have those just water cooler moments, walking from meeting to meeting and having a quick chat. So you really have to be intentional about virtual team meeting activities. You have to be intentional about regular check-ins to really foster that sense of belonging and maintaining team morale. Next, feedback mechanisms. So super important, like providing feedback remotely requires a really structured approach. So it's good to ensure that feedback sessions are clear, they're constructive, and really devoid of misunderstanding, so that everyone within the organization is really clear on like a feedback loop. And I would say that would be number one, what the feedback loop is. But secondly is where does someone's feedback go? Because I don't think it's feasible to take on feedback of it if you have a small to even a larger organization. People do provide great ideas, but it's impossible. You don't have the bandwidth, or you won't be able to put all those ideas into practice. So I think it's important, one, to know how to provide feedback, but two, where does your feedback go and what is the expectation around that as well.
Slightly,
Next, I think oh,
I was
sorry, go
just going to
ahead,
jump
Julie.
in and say something that I know of a client of mine was doing was, it kind of relates there, but just having a sort of car park of ideas, or maybe if things come up that they're saved in a particular place. Now they were using it more so for ideas that might come up in meetings, so they don't feel they have to immediately act on everything, but kind of might relate a little bit to what you're saying there about like, so that a person can come back to it and not be like, oh, what was said there, so I suppose you probably come to it later, but even just the way it's documented and tracked and everything like that.
So there's visibility in terms of, yeah, the feedback. It kind of sounded like you said there's a pool of feedback as well, which is that's an interesting idea. So what we do in our organization is we do collect feedback that way, and we do a process called icing. I'm not sure if anyone's familiar, but we essentially prioritize the feedback that's provided, right? So when you ice something, you might realize, okay, everyone's voted on like this is high urgency, or this is the most important thing for us to work on, and then we can allocate our time and resources to that too.
Interesting.
All right, we'll continue on. I've a few more, and then I'd love to hear from the group if possible. Um, so a few other things that I just mentioned when it comes to challenges, just as around technology. So obviously when we're working remotely, there's a higher degree of technology and proficiency, and it's increasing vastly. I won't even get into like the AI discussions and virtual reality type things too. But it is important to have effective tools, and sometimes that can be challenging for organizations. Next, I have flexibility and adaptability. So from a management point of view, you need to be a lot more flexible in terms of how you work with your direct reports or your employees too. And this could be in terms of their working hours, understanding like the unique challenges to do with remote work. And the last point I put in is globalization. I'm not sure if I actually put it in the slide, but I just want to do a quick mention for globalization. I do want to preface it is a very positive thing, I think, overall, but it can be a challenge because now if you're imagine yourself as a manager or an owner, you have teams that are much more diverse, that are from all parts of it. Could be Ireland, it could be all of Europe, you could be going into the US, you could be going into Asia. So your demographic changes, and I think you do have to be culturally sensitive and inclusive to ensure that all team members feel like they belong to the organization.
Mm. Yeah, really good point. And yeah, it is one that I've heard of managers kind of saying, "Oh yeah, I've had to really just become more aware of what's considered normal or appropriate in different kind of cultures. So yeah, that's a good one that I've definitely heard of before. I wonder if anybody else has any other challenges that they've come across maybe over the last while. Maybe they've heard of other people, maybe if it's not your own personal challenge. Um, I suppose Ashling mentioned in the chat that, remote work can be isolating. And so things like proactive communication can be helpful there. Um, but yeah, definitely can absolutely be isolating. It does require probably a lot of extra effort to get to know people, I suppose.
Yeah, and a lot of us voted for the 1 to 2 days a week in the office, right? And I
Mm.
think for me personally, a bit of it does lend to the isolation factor too, right? That sometimes I want to interact with. Sometimes I say that. Sometimes I don't. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
But I think it is good to have that social aspect too, from
Mm.
yeah, to not feel isolated, because it can be quite isolating, particularly depending on the type of work that you do as well.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, if there's no questions or follow-up, I think we can continue on and just talk about some of the benefits.
Mm.
So when we look at the benefits, first I went for enhanced productivity. Um, Now I know when you spoke with Jennifer Downing, there was a nice stat that the employees feel more productive, but then the managers feel like they're not more productive, or they can't really get a grasp of how much work that their employees are doing. But many employees do find that they're more productive working remotely, due to, I guess, fewer distractions, personalized work environment. There's no commute time as well. Um, Diverse talent. This is similar to what I mentioned about the globalization. So we can hire from anywhere now, which means you can get a more diverse workforce too. So you can bring a variety of perspectives, a variety of skills that might not be available to a business locally.
Mm.
I had to mention cost savings. You can save on overhead costs so associated with maintaining physical office spaces. And you see that a lot now. A lot of bigger companies are either some could be downsizing, or some could be actually renting out their office spaces if they are like big organizations.
Mm.
Next, I went for employee retention. A lot of people like the flexibility. We voted for it ourselves, and this can increase job satisfaction, leading to higher retention rates. So employees value the flexibility and the ability to be able to design their own work environment. Real-time performance metrics. So this is in line with the digital tools. So now managers can actually get real-time insights into employee performance. Um, you can provide quicker feedback and make adjustments in real time too. And again, I think this should be used with caution, and this is the push-pull again. Some companies might put an overemphasis on performance metrics at the detriment of like the employee experience. So just finding a balance there is important. Yeah, finally, very applicable to this one, Julie, flexibility in time zones. So business can
Mm.
offer round the clock services just by leveraging employees with different time zones. And this would be particularly pertain to like say customer service or kind of global operations.
Mm. Yeah.
All right. Any questions or any other opportunities that I haven't got to hear?
Yeah, again, feel free to unmute or pop into the chat. I like that point you're making as well of like kind of a positive reputation of companies, because again, I do think people are probably maybe more willing than ever to change jobs and to look for maybe something that's a bit better. And we're seeing that with a lot of companies when there's say like a forced return to work, people are leaving because it doesn't suit them anymore. Um,
Mhm.
and yeah, so it's if you are that company that is able to remote performance management and handle your sort of hybrid and remote working well, then yeah, you're probably going to attract a greater talent pool, probably.
Yeah, correct. I think the way we work is changing. You know, I think historically it was you get your job, like I have my job and
Mm.
that's my job.
Yeah.
And it's kind of migrated to more, it's more of a growth pathway for you personally, which I love. So I have seen a lot of people like within my organization, or kind of just my field, is like they'd spend a few years in one company, gain experiences, and then segue over to another company. So that is shifting, and like regardless of that, I think it's important for businesses to provide, like you said, to provide a good experience.
Yeah. There's a good comment in the chat that Sinead put in. She was saying that she agrees with all of these on the screen, especially retention and engagement. Other opportunities we have in my company is workcations, allowing employees to travel for a few weeks and even months, and yeah, work from abroad temporarily. So you're working, but you're in a different location, which yeah, I think is a massive benefit, I think, for people.
That is absolutely fantastic. I fully agree. The workations. I actually haven't heard of workations, but I
Mm.
mean, I really like that idea, and it kind of got me thinking of the opposite when you said, Julie, about the mandating the return to the office. It sounds like that company is taking a different standpoint. So I
Mm.
guess it's important for companies to maybe explain their reasoning
Yeah.
for coming back into the office. And I can't speak for like all companies everywhere. Some are probably cynical. Some it's probably as simple as we have a space. I want to use the space.
Yeah.
I'm paying big money. But I hope it's for more. They've like analyzed like cultural reasons
Mm.
or training and onboarding reasons or just creating a sense of community as well. Um,
Hopefully, yeah. Yeah. I can see
yeah,
Michelle as well saying any jobs going where Sinead works.
saying what we're all thinking. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think there definitely also, requires a lot of trust to do that as well. To say I do believe that my employee can work from anywhere. And if you say you're working, even if you're in Ireland or in Europe or in Asia, it doesn't matter. You're getting the work done. That's what matters. Yeah, I think it definitely requires a bit of trust as well. I just got one comment as well. It can be a challenge to balance the use of technology while the intended use is to support hybrid or remote working. It may often be perceived as a mechanism for monitoring. It can be challenging also to attain a shift towards managing by outcomes versus time, working hours, etc. So yeah, definitely might require a bit of a shift in the mindset there for managers.
Yeah, and I think yeah, shift from managers, but a lot of it too is about the delivery. You know, if you are, I presume you're introducing this new technology or maybe this new monitoring system. So it's really about how you deliver that and how you explain to the employee like the benefit that it's going to give to the organization, but it's not going to hamper like your experience, if that indeed is the intent of the organization.
Mm, yeah,
Yeah, that's a great point.
brilliant. Yeah. We keep moving along then in terms of how to kind of put this theory into practice.
Yeah, let's do it. And I'll be fully honest, the next few slides can be quite content heavy, so I do encourage you'll get these slides after. Julie scared the life out of me and said this was recording live on YouTube as well. So you can go back and watch the recording and pause. But yeah, let's go through just a few best practices. They're slightly tweaked to remote learning, but I mean they're standardized like performance management practices, like how we engage in conversations. So they're very applicable to all modes, whether you're fully in person, hybrid, or fully remote. First, we're going to look at strategy and delivery. So, as far as best practices are concerned, from a strategy and delivery perspective, it's really important to remember your downstream impact. So that's where leaders and an organization's accountability really lies. So, what is the risk of not addressing a performance issue, be it a good performance or a bad performance? What is the risk when you don't address in real time? So, it's important to note it's not just isolating to you and the individual. This can actually bleed into stakeholder groups, it can bleed into peer groups, it can bleed into your culture, which in turn can impact the customer and it can impact your product. So there's so many different ways that something as simple as somebody's performance can impact the organization. It's important to be mindful of that and our leaders addressing in real time. So I usually say a 24 to 72 hour window is a good amount of time to call something out. Sometimes you don't have to do it right in the moment. maybe you saw someone operate in a meeting in the morning and you said, you know what, let me take a couple of hours, let me sit on it, let me check in with myself and make sure that what I observed is indeed what I observed. So then at the end of the day, you can reach out to the individual and just say, hey, just want to do a friendly check-in with you. Is everything okay today? Yeah, it's all fine. Why? Just I observed in today's meeting, and if it's relevant, you can also say one or two others actually asked me as well, were you okay? This is what I observed. This is the perception and the experience it created, but I don't think you intended it that way. So what is your self-assessment of how the meeting went? And how do you have some awareness around these things? So notice there, I didn't accuse them. I said observation, the experience it created, the perception it created. We all know the phrase perception is reality, right? So that's an example of how you can call something out or behavior out, but not in an accusatory way. You definitely want to use smart questions, clear language, balance that positive feedback with opportunistic feedback, not a compliment sandwich, preferably. If people do like compliment sandwiches, I apologize. But you can go on to say, so I can go to someone and say, hey, I want to talk with you real quick about this report that you put together. You were incredibly meticulous with these reports, right? You're very consistent in this space. I noticed a couple of deficiencies this week, and I wanted to do a friendly check-in with you. Does it have to do with the systems? Does it have to do with the attention to detail? I just want to get a better sense of why this week's report looks a bit different so I can help troubleshoot with you. So I acknowledged something very positive about them in order to call attention to something that's really not part of their character or part of their performance. And I avoided the dreaded compliment sandwich.
Yeah, I suppose the compliment sandwich then can, yeah, it can veer into maybe you're trying so hard to, sandwich the opportunistic feedback in between with something nice that you might risk, I suppose, giving some feedback that's maybe disingenuous or not really relevant, or it kind of steers them off the scent for a minute. But yeah, I suppose I do like that approach though at the same time of, what do you admire and how is it, if there is things to recognize as a positive, then definitely do recognize those as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. The sandwich it's ineffective. Dilutes like you said, it dilutes the real message that you're trying to get across. That's doing an injustice to the person you're talking to, in my point of view. Excellent. Next, we'll continue on with administrative and follow through. You always want to create coaching opportunities. You always want to try tie it into a learning for an individual from an administrative standpoint. So follow up in real time. I'd advise not to, if it is for performance based, I'd advise not using platforms such as Slack or messaging type platforms to address performance. It's it's not really healthy, it's not private. It's very, very visible. Um, you can use these platforms if you want to do the logistical aspect, like setting up the meeting and wanting to connect with someone. But I personally, I'll use email to share things very privately, especially if it's something like a development action plan, or a document or something like that that needs to go out. You want to co-collaborate in the process. You don't have to own everything. So if you put a development action plan together, you can put some suggested resources, absolutely. But you can say, hey, based on your learning style and your preferences, what additional resources might you need in order to help you do your job more effectively? So it's really important to work on the process together. Don't wait till last minute to get experts such as HR involved. So if you need help, if things already, so if you need help and if things have already escalated, it really is a lot more difficult for experts or like say HR to step in at that time as well. So try not to wait till last minute, try to be more proactive. Finally, we look at environment and communication. So this really can make or break a remote performance conversation, no matter how well prepared that you are. So it's about making sure that you're using the right etiquette, you're thinking thoughtfully about your environment. Is it distracting? Have you silenced your phone? Are you making sure that there's nothing in the space that's going to get in the way of the conversation? And that goes for the person you're speaking to as well, right? And I guess when I'm speaking here, I'm kind of speaking through the lens of a manager, but it works. It kind of works both ways. So is there a space where they can talk freely without distraction? And I would say if for any reason that you're observing that they cannot have a conversation without the distraction, feel liberated to not let the conversation continue. So you can pause, say, hey, I'm observing there's a lot going on. How about reschedule for another time? And then you can use your platforms like Slack to reschedule. I just want to give my undivided attention to you in this meeting. Another thing to look out for is if you are sensing a lot of emotion, is that person going to be fully engaged? Again, you can pause the conversation, you can reschedule for a later time. And you can do that in a kind way, right? It's not dismissive. You can do it in a way that as a leader, you still show empathy, you can still show compassion, but then you can refocus back to the areas that you need to discuss. Finally, I've put in a really important point, and Julie, I think you've had presentations around active listening, or it's come up certainly, I think, in the conflict webinar recently too. Listen to respond. No, do not listen to respond. Listen to understand. Listen to understand. Don't listen to respond. So listening to respond is defensive, and it's going to invite the same behavior right back at you. So you've probably all been in conversations where people are talking, like I'll admit I've done it myself, and I'm thinking of what I'm going to say, and then I have to check myself and be like, wait, I'm actually not listening to the person in front of me. So it's really important to actually listen to them and not be listening to respond. So listen with curiosity, listen with empathy, listen for what's being said. You can read the room. How are they operating on Zoom? Are they leaning in? Are they super distant? Have their hands folded? Have they disconnected? Are they looking you in the eye? So these are all little tweaks or behaviorally from a remote standpoint that we can just be looking out for as well, just to make the conversation as engaging as possible. I'll pause there. Are there any other best practices that have worked well for you that you want to add to this list?
If anybody wants to come off mute, or if you want to pop into the chat, let us know. I like what you were saying there about, listening, like actually being present and really listening to people, and kind of goes back to that point of maybe mocking through the conversation or practicing, okay, what do I need to kind of get across? And then you've done that bit of work, and you can then just be more fully present rather than thinking, okay, what do I need to say next? So I suppose they all kind of interact with each other. The preparation and planning kind of informs then how present you can be, I suppose.
Yeah, and depending on your position, and the size of where you work, you might have a manager who you're able to like practice with. You might have a peer.
Yeah.
Obviously, if it's a really sensitive conversation, we want to keep it. I wouldn't really be putting something about an employee out there to someone that's inappropriate. But obviously, if it's your line manager, that might be more appropriate. Or you can still just practice. You don't have to give details. You can just say, I'm going to talk about XYZ. Can let me practice with you. I find that is really, yeah, that's really, really helpful to do.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent.
Yeah. So again, if anybody has any things that have worked well for them, it'd be great to share it. So it might help other people. But I suppose we keep going along then to, I suppose, the overall, the more, I suppose, holistic approach to performance management. Um,
Absolutely. Yeah. We'll start with quantitative. And really the whole point of this slide is if you are looking to create core competencies or like responsibilities within a particular job, that this framework will help you kind of capture it from three key aspects. So when we look at a holistic approach, the first one is around quantitative. So the reality is that we have to have a metric. We need to measure in some capacity. So in order to gauge or benchmark to get a sense of what's working well, what's not working well, and to have some form of measurement. So I want to convey here to treat the metric like an indicator. So don't treat it like the be all and end all. This will really break your talent if you're overemphasizing on metrics. The analogy that I like to use is simply a car analogy. If you don't drive, you've probably been in a car, engine light goes out, and it's like, oh, that's an indicator that something's wrong with the car. But the engine light doesn't tell you exactly what's wrong with the car. It could be an alternator, could be a starter, could be a timing belt, could be an engine that needs to get flushed, could be a fuse that got blown. It doesn't tell you exactly what's going on, but it sends you a smoke signal that something qualitatively is not working. So now you have to go about figuring out how you're going to decode what's not working in the car, as how you're going to decode what's not working in the car. So another example is if you think about tires. Some of you might have fancy cars that can tell you like left front tire is flat. I don't. Mine just says, mine would just give me an indication the tire is flat. So I actually have to go out and I have to look at each individual tire to see which one is not performing. And then when I find it, put air back in the tire, fix the indicator, light goes off, we're back up and running. So treat performance the same. When you see a metric, it's usually correlated with something happening qualitatively that's influencing the output.
I
So
like that I like that analogy as well. Like it, for maybe a new manager, it's like being a new driver, you don't really maybe know where exactly to look for, okay, I know something's not quite right. And I suppose it might be more inclined to maybe doubt themselves, but I suppose having that confidence in themselves as a learner, as okay, where can I find out the information to understand this signal a bit better? I suppose again, the more experienced drivers like that might kind of go, oh, I know what's wrong straight away. Again, the more experienced managers who are continually upskilling themselves probably are able to, they know where to look maybe a bit quicker, to kind of continue on with that analogy.
that's such a skill, Julie, to be able to do that, and that does come with practice. I was thinking through if I'm working with a manager who will say is really hyper focused on metrics, like you have to be, as I said at the start, you have to be to order to achieve organizational outcomes, but that would be personally demotivating to me if my manager just kept coming to me as like, why is this number not this number?
Yeah,
Versus like, let's sort out the process here. I'll help you, I'll support you
yeah,
in terms of a qualitative aspect.
yeah.
All right. That is a nice segue
It
into
is, yeah.
qualitative, right? Well done. Okay, so this is really where we want the heart of management to be focused on. So this is the one that impacts the morale of your talent, right? And this is the one that can really help reverse performance fast. So when you think about qualitative aspects, how is the individual applying themselves in their job? So how are they applying their knowledge? How are they applying their skills, their abilities? How are they adhering to protocol? How are they engaging with customers if you're customer facing? It is really important, and I really do like your point from a managerial standpoint, like that is a skill to be able to analyze the qualitative aspect and improve someone's performance, and then that will improve the output and improve the quantitative aspect. The last area I put in is around behavioral. Sometimes we don't pay enough attention to the behavioral aspect. So what is the behavioral conduct of the individual? So how do they operate? We like to say, like, how do they operate as a citizen within the company, right? So are they respectful? Do they co-partner with you? Do they hold themselves accountable? Are they kind to their peers? Do they take on? not to say take on extra work, but do they like lend themselves to, we call them stretch assignments? Um, how are they representing themselves? How are they representing their team? Um, how do they represent your team when they go and operate with or support someone else's team? So it's critical to look at these things. So in my experience as a manager, I've helped reverse a lot of like performance actions and reversed and kind of tempered escalations, like purely focused on this category. So I've had a lot of conversations where behaviorally something's off and it's determined it's a job fit issue. So then you tweak their job slightly and then they start flourishing again. In some scenarios, and it's difficult, it's a fit issue. I mean, they determine themselves, right? I'm not going to tell anyone they're not right for a particular job, but through conversations, like they determined that this organization isn't for them. And then you still support them in finding a new employment as well. Um, I'm going to take a pause. Any questions here?
I
We're
suppose
good.
it's
Julie, do you have
yeah, yeah.
any questions?
I suppose something I was kind of conscious of is, I suppose, getting quite clear on, the values and the principles, I suppose, so that you know what kind of behavior aligns with those. Because again, I've worked with a good few kind of smaller businesses, and maybe they haven't taken the time to go, okay, what is what's the way we do things around here? What are the values, the kind of mission that we're all striving towards, and that, I suppose, make it easier then to give that kind of behavioral feedback.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is really important to have missions and principles, but you want someone to feel comfortable working within those missions and principles. You want them to be themselves at work as well. And that can sometimes be a tough balance to manage too. If anyone has experience there, it'd be great to hear. I am also conscious. I know we have only 1 or 2 minutes. That was a fast hour.
Yeah, it kind of flew. Um, will we kind of move
Yeah, I think
through those couple of slides,
I'll
or?
just speak very, very quickly to documentation and then we
Yeah.
can open it up for questions. And again, these slides are there for you after too. So documentation, sometimes people again see it as like a mundane task, but it is quite important for a few reasons. One is um you can monitor or just see the progress of an individual through like development sessions or frequent one-to-one touch points. And then if I do look at it from an organizational standpoint, and I promise this isn't a negative slant, but it's to act as you have to think like you're acting as legal counsel, right? So in the situation that you need to backtrack on situations, you do have documentation there, particularly for performance, or I have their PIPs or LIPs. So just if you have to do performance improvement plans, it really is better to be proactive and get ahead of those things. And I do like that mantra of just thinking like legal counsel in order to get your documentation set up.
Mm.
And again, these slides will be there for you as well. And if you want to go back and look at them, or if anyone wants to contact me outside of this sync. I just put in a quick testimonial. This was someone that I worked closely with. It was a really nice managerial story, actually, that when we brought in our performance management system, they actually created the documentation process for the other leaders, which one was great. But then two, we were able to document their progress, and they really were a top performer in at Noom too. So it was really nice actually to see the documentation on paper and see their evolution over like the few quarters and few years. All right. I believe that opens it up for any questions, Julie,
Mm-hmm.
after our key takeaways.
Yeah, exactly. Again, anyone can pop questions into the chat there. But I suppose we'll just kind of summarize, I guess, what we discussed there.
So from an organizational level, the cornerstone of effective performance management lies in two key areas. So it's strategic alignment and support. So every organization has a vision and a mission. The performance management should reflect these and guide employees towards that vision. Regarding support, it's about setting expectations. It's about equipping our teams with the right tools, training, and resources. So from a managerial lens, as a leader, so our roles they're multifaceted now. It is difficult. It's not an easy job to become a leader. So beyond strategy and execution, it really is about the human touch, about understanding, and about communication. It's about understanding that no two team members are the same, recognizing individual strengths, aspirations, and challenges, and we have to tailor our leadership approach. It's about having open communication, and a culture that fosters trust. And finally, you just mentioned the employee takeaway. For all of us as employees, so our journey in the organization, it's both about professional growth and about well-being as well. So the onus on growth is not just on the organization or the manager, but it's on the employee as well. So you can regularly assess your own performance, you can set your own goals, and really just you can really just drive your own growth. So it's essential to remember the importance of balance, right? So utilizing resources provided by the organization, setting boundaries where we need to. And yeah, they're just some key takeaways for us as we wrap up.
Yeah, exactly. And if anybody has anything that stood out to them that they found really interesting, that'd be great if you want to pop it into the chat. I think for me, the thing that kind of sticks out in my mind is the, metrics being indicators, right? Like not being the sole focus, but actually, okay, what kind of lies beneath this? I think that was an interesting one. And I like that analogy of, a light is going off, a little warning light saying something, but we need to kind of investigate it a little bit further. Um, let's just see. Yeah, okay, Katrina, you're just saying lots to reflect on after this. I just thought I'd pop up to let you know about our next session then. So it is on the 8th of November. My colleague Stuart will be talking about, I suppose, the way that things are, constantly changing, all these different challenges that we face. How do we set our business up so that it can be resilient and not just survive, but thrive and grow, even in uncertain times? You can, as always, keep in touch with us. We do these sessions regularly. If anyone is new and hasn't been to one before, we have these regularly. So if you follow us on LinkedIn, or we have a LinkedIn group, you can follow us on Eventbrite. There's all these different ways of keeping in touch with us. I suppose I'm happy for people to connect on LinkedIn. Podge, would people you'd be open to people connecting with you? Or
No, no, not at all. No,
you...
no, absolutely. Yeah, please.
Brilliant.
I'm always up for just conversations and chats. Yeah, I'd welcome any connection. Yes, thank you.
Brilliant. Yeah. So I suppose we can hang on for another maybe minute or so, just in case anybody has any last questions. But if not, thank you so much for joining us, and I'll hopefully see you at a future session then.